Hey y'all, it's Caitlin. So for February's tutorial, we are going to be making the male and female versions of Nidoran out of polymer clay and making like a little, kind of like a mini environment for them. And this is my first polymer clay tutorial on the channel, by the way. I hope you guys like it. I have at least one more coming up pretty soon. But anyway, so I start out by just getting a wooden board because it's a nice surface to work on and it's oven safe. But the smooth texture of those boards when you first buy them, which they're pretty cheap, you can find them for about $1, but the smooth texture isn't enough for the clay to grab onto. And so by roughing it up and scratching it up with an X-Acto knife and using the liquid Sculpey, which is in that bottle you can see in the lower corner, it'll create like a suction for the clay to grab onto the board. And just so you guys know, most of the techniques I'm going to be using here, I learned it all from Nudie Crafter, watching her channel. So I'm not as experienced with polymer clay as I am resin. So if you guys want to watch like really detailed tutorials about using polymer clay, go watch her channel. But anyway, so I want to make like a little river flowing by just to give it a little bit more detail, I guess. Make it a little bit more interesting to look at. So I sketched out where I want the river to go, and as you can see I'm painting white, and that'll just make it pop more, the color, when we put it down with the resin, when we put the resin down. Because you know, it just brightens it up. That way it's not... the white will make it brighter. How about I just say that? I suck at explaining things. But it will. It'll make the color show up a lot more, make the blue show up a lot more in the resin when we put it down later. After I got the base ready, I get some dark green clay. Now, if you can work on a solid surface, it's better. I'm working on a little fold-away table at the moment here. So it's not the most sturdy, and that's why you can see it like shaking when I'm rolling it. But anyway, so you're wanting to make that as flat as possible while not making it too fragile. The clay I'm using is Sculpey 3. I have used Fimo before. Those are the two most popular brands here in North America. I don't like Fimo so much. Fimo is stronger when it's hardened, when it's baked. But Sculpey is just easier to work with for me. I do have some Fimo colors that I like better than the Sculpey colors. But for the most part, I only use Sculpey, and everything you see me use in this video is Sculpey. But yeah, you can use pasta machines to roll out clay. Obviously, you can't use them for pasta afterwards, but you can find a pasta machine if you can to make it a lot easier on yourself. As you can see, I'm kind of struggling, but yeah, the look of the grass texture will be worth it in the end, hopefully. After I get it flat enough, or flat enough that I'm happy with it, I put it on the base and start cutting out around that river that I put down. I'm just going to be working on this sections at a time. I personally find that when you're doing like ground level stuff, and especially when it's supposed to be an outdoor environment, which I have done a couple, if it's uneven, it looks a lot more realistic. So I'm not really worrying about covering it in one sheet. So I'm only going to do it a little bit at a time, make it a little bit less uneven, just to, again, give it more realistic look to it. But while you're doing this, you want to protect your work surface. I'm on a piece of wax paper, and you can see me using the liquid Sculpey a little bit. Oh, and by the way, that stuff, it will not dry out. I tested it once. I just left a drop of it on my workstation for like weeks, and it still hadn't dried up. It will not cure until it is in the oven. So you are not working against time here at all. You can take your leisurely time with both the liquid Sculpey and the actual clay. You're good. Especially this brand. It's not going to dry out on you anytime soon. But anyway, What was I saying? I have no. Oh yeah. Okay, so you want to protect your work surface, and you want to make sure you keep checking your hands during this. I know that sounds weird, but the color can stain your hands, and if you're working with multiple colors like I am, if you don't clean your hands, preferably with rubbing alcohol because it's easier, and it'll take the clay away instantly. You can stain your other colors, and then that's just a pain to have to remove. And again, you can clean up both your hands and your actual pieces with rubbing alcohol. It's a lot easier to lift off fingerprints, smudges, color contamination, excess glitter that somehow got into your work surface. So I don't use it here, I don't believe, because I was so... It's been a while since I've worked with polymer clay, and this took forever, and I just wanted to be done with it already. So I didn't even bother really cleaning up my pieces, but that's how you do it, with rubbing alcohol on a Q-tip. So here you can see me taking little bitty circles, or making little bitty circles with my needle tool, and that will create a grass-like texture. And as you can see, it takes a long time, and you have to be patient, and your wrist is gonna hurt after you finish. Just FYI. But it will make it look a lot more better and realistic in the end. Before I actually started sculpting the Pokemon, I got out my Let's Go Pikachu game on my 3DS and pulled up the Pokedex so I could get a 360 view of each of the Pokemon. So for anyone who is non a Pokemon fan, the purple one is the male and the blue one is the female. And I decided, since the steps are pretty much the same, there's a little bit difference in the sculpting, but since the structures are pretty much exactly the same, I only filmed myself sculpting the male one. I did the female one off camera. But you can see here, just to save clay and to make it a little bit less hefty when you've finished the sculpture, I used tin foil, aluminum foil, as the base. So in other words, the inside of the sculpture, instead of it being pure clay, it's mainly filled up with that tin foil to, again, fill in space. So I used this Sculpey, I think this was violet, I think that was the only name for this particular color, instead of some, weird color that they always give to colors in stores and stuff. But anyway, so I got this violet. I tried to find the colors that would best fit each Pokemon. This was the closest color I could get to what Nidoran's color really is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a little bit lighter than that, but we're gonna go with it anyway. After rolling it out, just like the grass, I took it up and wrapped it around the tinfoil. Now I think I fixed my mistake here in a little bit. I did not fix the mistake for the female. I forgot to put the liquid Sculpey, I forgot to put the liquid Sculpey at first on the tinfoil. It'll just help it stay more sturdy that way. I forgot to do this for the female one, but it seems to be holding up pretty well. But yeah, for an extra precaution, it's a good idea just to use the liquid Sculpey. And by the way, if I didn't explain it before, this stuff is just liquid clay. It's not like a glue or a true adhesive or anything like that. So it's fine to get on your hands. Just don't be stupid and stick it in your mouth or something. So if you just get it on your fingers, it's fine. You can just wipe it off and carry on. But it's safe to use. And it will help these things stay together more sturdy. After you get the clay wrapped around the aluminum, the trick is to smooth and smooth and smooth and just keep smoothing it until you want to make sure that none of the foil is poking out, and 2, you just want to try to create the basic shape of the body. You can see me adding more clay to fill up a few spots where there was just an indent in the foil, therefore the clay caved in on it too. So yeah, I was just trying to smooth and blend it, and you can do this with either your hands or you can actually get, tools that won't leave fingerprints behind. I just don't have those tools, so I had to do it this way. So I was trying to create the face of it, just give it a general shape, like kind of like a, it's hard to describe, like a pointed N almost, to make sure that I would have a base to sculpt the face in a second. And then make the back part more rounded for the butt. So yeah, this took a while. This is not a 5-minute thing, y'all. This takes time. This takes hours. So just make sure to be patient. You can see me using a rounded tool there, a dotting tool, just to try to round out some of those harsher edges a little bit. It honestly didn't do that much good. I just had to keep, adding clay and smoothing it in, and yeah, it took a while. So here you can see me adding another small amount of clay. I'm trying to like flatten it out and make it almost like, well, not really flatten, but make it kind of like a curved triangle. And this is to further sculpt the jawline of the Pokemon. So yeah, I think I actually ended up taking some of that away later, because looking at this photo now, or this footage now, it almost looks like a purple Psyduck. But I just took that, I took that and tried to sculpt that jawline the best I could, again, blending it and shaping it onto the base of it, making sure that it blends as seamlessly as possible. And when you're taking 2 pieces of clay, this is the best way to do it. Take a needle tool, or really anything, long and skinny. If you don't have this, a toothpick would work. And just roll it. Use the actual, not the point obviously, but the side of it, and just roll it and roll it and roll it. You're gonna see me using a lot, this tool a lot this video, and just keep going until it's smooth enough. It'll create more blunt lines, but you can go in with your fingers later and smooth it over a little bit. So yeah, it works really well. Again, you just have to have the patience to do it. So after I finally got the jawline molded on, I started working on the front paws, I guess you could say. I'm not really sure if Nidoran is meant to look, a lot of Pokemon are meant to look like animals. I'm not sure if Nidoran is meant to look like anything other than a Nidoran, so I'm just gonna call it paws. But anyway, so I rolled up a long snake, and just cutting off some parts, because the male Nidoran, when you look at it, usually it's leaning over on its front legs, like it's almost looks like it's ready to pounce, but it's not. It's really hard to describe, but you can see it in the picture at the very beginning. So it's almost like he's laying down on him. So I wasn't really trying to get the shape perfect, just, enough to pass on this one. And it did take me a few tries to get it. Eventually, you can see I started all over there. But eventually I got it. Once I did get the shapes perfectly right for both of them, I made one side a little bit flatter and then pushed it into the body to make it a little bit, fatter again. I took them off and put just a teeny bit of that liquid Sculpey. Again, it's going to act as a glue for when we bake it. And then I put the legs on and blended it in with my tool again. So yeah, it just assume, oh yeah, and I also used wire, I forgot about that. That wire, I found it at like Walmart like years ago. For smaller projects, you want small but sturdy wire, and I think this long pause is when I had to get up and get my pliers. Yeah. So, but it's just to add a little bit extra strength with pieces that are going to be protruding through from the main part. So for the limbs and the ears and stuff, or did I use it for the ears? I don't think I used it for the ears, but for all the legs and stuff, I did stick a little bit of wire in there and then put the liquid Sculpey and blend it in with my needle tool again. After the front legs are connected, I start on the hind legs, and to do the haunches, I guess, I don't know, whatever, the very back part of the leg, I take the clay, round it into a ball, cut it in half, and I'm just putting each of those half spheres on each side of the body. At this point, it's starting to look a lot like a frog, but it won't look like a frog in the end, I promise. When I found that was the one thing that I knew was the exact right size. I never had to reshape it at all through this entire project. I think that's really the only thing that I never had to reshape. So taking more of that wire, I'm going to use it and some more liquid Sculpey. I just put my hand over it just to make sure that the pieces don't fly everywhere. So, and I'm not exactly wearing protective eye gear through any of this. So I just used the wires and the liquid Sculpey to attach it onto the body and then smoothed it in just like I did the front legs. After the haunches are put on, I make small little pegs for the feet just by rolling in a very small snake, tapering off an end of it just to make it a bit more pointed for where the claws will go later on, and putting them onto the haunches there, and again blending them in. So both the Nidoran have spikes all over their body. They're poison type Pokemon. I think the spikes are meant to hold the poison. I'm not entirely sure. That's the way it works with the bug type Pokemon. I'm not sure about this one. So I started with the one on its head to make it look a little bit like a unifrog. Really weird. But anyway, so the male spikes, the male has more spikes than the female one, first of all. And I was trying to make it even there and make the jawline even. It has more spikes and they're longer than the females would be. So after shaping and remodeling the spikes and everything, I eventually got to a point where I liked it. So by dipping the little wire into the bottle of liquid Sculpey, I went ahead and stuck it into the body before I put the spike on the head. You really want to try, sometimes it's hard because the spikes I'm going to make later on are smaller, and it's hard to put that wire in them because it's so small, the wire peeks out. But you want to try and make it work because that wire is going to hold it steady while you blend it in. Because obviously I'm having to push a little bit on this thing, and I'm sorry about the shadow, by the way, that the light cast off here because it looks kind of blurry when it's not. But that wire is giving it enough strength to hold it steady for me as I'm blending it in. So it's a very important step. So I mentioned the male one has more spikes than the female one. It has 4 longer ones down the middle of its back, more towards the end of its body, and then 3 on either side of those group of spikes. So I started with the middle set, the middle 4, and this stuff, polymer clay like this will not stick to each other. Obviously, that's why I'm having to do all the blending and stuff, but it should stick there long enough for you to figure out where to space everything out at. Kind of like putting everything down before you glue it down when you're decorating something. So it's very smart move. And I'm trying to use my blade to cut them more down to size when I think they're too big. It took a lot of reshaping these spikes to get them right. So the spikes y'all just saw me make I deemed too small because the spikes that's going to go on either side of those main spikes are going to be smaller. So I ended up scrapping them and making larger ones. And you'll see here in just a sec. What I'm doing is putting a small amount of liquid Sculpey down. I'm not using the wires for the spikes. I did regret that, like I said, for the head. I did regret not having it because I had to hold it with my hand and try not to distort the shape very much. But you can see I'm putting a small amount, adding the spike, blending it in, and then continuing until all 4 spikes are done. I used the same process for the smaller spikes as I did the larger one. I just didn't blend them themselves together all that much. That shadow is really bugging me. This setup was a very temporary setup, guys. I have one more video, which I'll post eventually, that has the same setup, but after that, it won't be there again for a long time. But anyway, but yeah, I put all the spikes where I wanted them, and then one by one, I would, put it on there to measure, and then one by one, I would put them back on and blend them in very gingerly. And I did this on both sides of the larger spikes. For the ears, I took a ball of clay, made it into like a more of a cylinder-like shape, and then I took my rolling pin and started rolling it out and trying to make it, bigger than what I need it to be, and then carve at it after. I kept measuring on the head to see if it was the proper width, and as you can see, I'm carving it out a little bit. Nidoran are known for having these gigantically large ears. So this part was kind of it wasn't a struggle for me to make, but later on it caused a little bit of a trouble. After I got it to the right shape, I took my X-Acto knife again and very carefully, and always looking at the reference picture of the male Nidoran, I went with my X-Acto knife and cut out the little spikes around, not really spikes, but more like edges around its ear, and then just used my fingers to shape it. And of course, I had to repeat the process for the second ear and try to make them as symmetrical as possible. Easier said than done. I used a dab of liquid Sculpey on the head where the ear was to go, and then I lightly pressed it in, and then used my needle tool to blend it in again. For extra security, I put some more liquid Sculpey behind the ear, right where it met the body, and blended it in with my round pointed tool. As you can see here, and there you go. I just used that to push in the Sculpey and spread it around to the width of the ear. To keep the ears upright, or trying to keep the ears upright, I put a small piece of tin foil in between the ears, and as you can see, I kind of folded them inwards to make sure they didn't fall out, because the liquid polymer clay can crack in the oven and sometimes break off the more delicate pieces, so I tried to save it this way. They did stay upright, they didn't fall off, but as you will see in the end product, the male Nidoran's ears are very caved inward, so it doesn't look all that good, but it's good enough for me. I tried to reshape the foil, but it didn't work. Right before I was getting ready to bake it, I realized I had totally forgotten the tooth and the claws on the feet. Yeah, so really quick, I brought out my white clay, measured the tooth, tried to measure the claws. They were really small, so I just ended up making like little bitty balls with trying to spike the ends a tad bit. And I also tried using wire. It didn't really help. all that much. When you're using smaller pieces like this, honestly, unless you have like super small like jewelry type wire that really isn't all that strong, I would recommend just dipping it in liquid Sculpey, like put a little bit out on your table like I ended up doing, and just sticking it onto the figure, and when it bakes, that should seal on rather well. It would even be better if you scored the piece, just gave it a little bit of texture first, but I didn't do that, but it's still holding on pretty well. And of course, after you get it all done, bake according to your package instructions for your clay. I got this small chalk pastel set for Christmas this year, and this was my first time using it. I was going to try it before I baked Nidoran, but I forgot. So I got the red and the dark blue, and I shaved some off with my X-Acto knife on the table. And I'm just using this to shade Nidoran. I'm using a damp paintbrush to apply it, just to help it stick a little bit better. And it just gives it that bit more of a lifelike quality to it. I was actually kind of scared using it because it was my first time doing it, but I think it turned out pretty well. I put it around the horns, the base of the ears, around the contours of the legs and arms, on the bottom of the spikes. Yeah, I think it turned out pretty well, and of course I did the same thing for the female Nidoran as well. And I think they both turned out pretty good. I'm definitely going to be looking forward to using these chalk pastels on my future projects. Again, I made the female Nidoran completely off camera, just to keep this video from being twice as long. But after she came out of the oven, I went ahead and painted on all the details for both Nidoran with acrylic paint. This included the spots on their bodies, the inner parts of their ear, and their eyes as well. Obviously, you can tell, I think that the front legs for my female Nidoran didn't come out near as well as I wished it did. But I think the ears for the female Nidoran actually came out a lot better than the male, but y'all see the finished product here in a second, so y'all can tell me what you think. Most of the paint, I probably went over about 3 coats worth just to make it opaque as possible for the ears and the spots. And you can tell I'm using, well, you probably can't because I'm going to edit most of it out, but I am making sure to use different size paint brushes to make the detailing as good as possible. And again, I am referencing those pictures as close as I can off camera. For the finer details in the eyes, I used my dotting tool instead of a paintbrush because obviously it's smaller and it's better for details. The female's eyes came out a lot better than the male's. The male's look like he's wearing a lot of eyeliner. A lot of eyeliner, but I dealt with it. While I was waiting for the paint to dry, I figured I'd go ahead and do the resin part. So I took 2 pieces of clear Scotch tape and I taped it on either ends of the river, just to help the resin to stay in place so it didn't spill over the edge while I was pouring it before I cured it. And I am using UV resin here. This is the one that I got in my Sophie and Toffee box that I unboxed on my channel in the last craft video. And I got some blue colorant and I used just a little bit of it until I just kept adding a little bit of it in until I got the perfect shade of blue that I wanted. And then for some reason, every time I make water, I want to put in these little blue sparkles just to give it some flair, I guess. I don't know. I think it looks pretty, I guess. So I just took a small amount in a silicone measuring cup. Mixing cup, rather. I can't think today. Mixing cup. And when I mixed it all together, I put a little bit on either end. Put it right up against the tape with my, you can see I'm using my popsicle stick here to do this. Making sure all the white is covered up and then curing it with my UV light. This is just to add a little bit extra reinforcement, just in case the tape didn't stick as well as I wanted it to. And then after I did that to both ends, I went ahead and filled up the rest of it with the resin. So you can use regular epoxy resin if you want. The UV resin is just easier. And if we had just left the wood color on there, it just wouldn't be as bright as it is right there. So it's definitely a smart idea whenever you're using something translucent to go ahead and paint it white first. And after, you can just hold your light on this. It's shallow enough you can, but just as an extra precaution, I put mine in my UV light for a few minutes, but this should take no more than, I would say, a minute under one of these little torches. So yeah. Off camera, I painted the base a dark green just to make it all match. And here you'll see the finished paint jobs for both Nidoran. And after I got all the paint on and all the coats I needed, I got this matte Mod Podge, it's not medicine, it's Mod Podge, mixed with water and put 3 coats on the entire figure, each figure. Simply because it's a huge pain in the butt to take super glue off your hands, I use rubber gloves whenever I'm working with it. Usually, I don't use it on my magnets because it's so quick, but with these ones I placed out where I wanted the Nidoran to go. You can see a little excess residue on their feet from the Mod Podge as it was drying, but you won't see it when it's glued on here, so I didn't bother to take it off. I'm just putting little dabs of this Gorilla Glue onto each foot and putting it on the base. And I do this for obviously both ones, and I try to make them, you know, both facing the water, looking like they're about to get a drink at the same time, but for some reason I remember that. I remember a part where 2 Nidoran were taking a drink out of the river at the same time at the same spot. I don't know why. And that river is super small compared to them, but we're gonna go with it. We are just gonna go with it. I turned off the light from my phone so you can see it without the glare, so I hope you guys can see everything okay. I did end up adding a little love ball, Pokeball in the background, just to give it a little bit more, you know, just something to put there. It looked so empty in that little back corner, I had to put something there. So but yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Oh, by the way, that Pokeball is just a round piece of white clay painted to look like a love ball. That's it. So anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I definitely love the support that my craft videos get. I put a lot more work into these videos than I do my other ones, so it greatly pleases me when you guys enjoy them as well. And again, I understand no one watched the full video, I don't think last time, or very few did. Let me know if you guys would like to see videos like this being put on the Premiere features so we can all talk to each other. I can answer any questions you guys have about the craft in the live chat while it's going on. I would give an announcement of what time it would go on. So yeah, just let me know if you guys would be interested in that or not. So anyway, guys, again, thank you all so much for your support. Thank you guys so much for watching. And like always, remember, it's a community and not a competition. I'll see y'all later. Bye.